Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. Welcome to the Scholar Online YouTube channel. In this channel, we make videos on learning web development, learning web application development, e-commerce development, digital marketing. If you're new to this channel, please feel free to subscribe. You'll find the subscribe button at the bottom of the video that you're watching right now, that red button over there. Please subscribe so that you will always be informed and you'll get notifications every time we set up a new video in this channel. We have new videos on Wednesdays and on Saturdays. Also, like this video and leave me a comment below, and I will try to get to each and every single comment that is made on this video. Another useful feature that we have on our videos is at the bottom inside the description box. If you expand the description of the video, you will see we've got timestamps to interesting sections in the videos that we're making, because we make a lot of long videos, so you don't have to watch the entire video. You can just read through the timestamp and read about the section that you're interested in, and you can just click on that timestamp and it will take you exactly to that section, and you can just watch that section. And it's also useful in future. If you return, you can just go to the timestamp and click on the section that you want to watch again. And also in the description below, guys, we've got links to our social media channels: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Please follow us there as well. We sometimes output information in there, and let's start learning. In this video, I'm going to be showing you something really interesting. A couple of weeks ago, we did a tutorial where I showed you how to use how to get accounting software installed, free accounting open source software installed on your server. I'm using one of the DigitalOcean quick installs, and I think I've tried it out. That's really amazing software. The fact that it's available for free is going to be quite a lifesaver for a lot of small businesses. But some of the challenges with this, free open source software that I encounter, even with accounting software, is you didn't create the code yourself. And sometimes when you've got bugs and issues to try and solve, it's difficult. You have to always rely on the designer to be able to help you. And sometimes with the free software, the designer is not available because they gave it away for free. And if you're not coding on PHP and you have no idea how PHP works, sometimes you can get stuck with a client and the software breaks and you have no idea how to fix it, and you're the one that sold it to them, and you're in trouble. So if you want to do it the hardcore way and you want to build it yourself, of course it's going to be quite a mission to try and build something of that nature yourself. But if you're just a small company and all you want to do is perhaps just have invoices, just be able to count all your invoices in one place, in a database, have them saved in PDF, be able to email them to clients when they need it, that's something we can definitely do. And in this tutorial series, I'm going to start a tutorial series today where I will show you exactly how to do that yourself using Python or some code that you know how to solve, so that when you have bugs and issues, you can go into your code yourself and fix it up and solve it and maintain it yourself. Because these open source softwares, when they stopped getting maintained, you're stuck with the software where you have all your customer information in something that's not maintained. And I've had an instance where not only did they stop maintaining it, they actually upgraded it, and the new versions broke the old ones, so there wasn't backward compatibility, and all my information just got lost, and I couldn't recover it, and there's no one to help you because they just gave you the software for free. It's like, use at your own risk, right? And sometimes you've got client stuff saved in there and in the database, and the thing breaks and you can't access it, and it's like a bit of a pain. So maybe it might be better to build your own stuff, even if it's on a small scale, right? At least you know what is happening under the hood. So in this tutorial today, what you're going to need is, we're going to build this in Python and Django, and we're going to use Bootstrap front end. Because I want you to be able to follow with me. So I'm not going to use any of those paid templates in this tutorial series. I'm going to allow you to go off the Bootstrap website and download the free version of the HTML and JavaScript libraries, so you can completely follow along, and so that I can also share this code. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to open source this. I'm going to share it with you. If you followed along with me, you're going to be able to download the video tutorial, and you're going to be able to download the actual code template. I'm going to show you where I'm going to save it and install it and build with me. So for that, I'm going to use open source free available templates so that I can be able to share the code with you. In the past, I couldn't share the code with you because I used paid templates, and I'm not allowed to share that code open source. Now, what we will cover in this whole video tutorial series, we're gonna start by creating our models, our invoice models inside of Python Django. Obviously, we'll start with creating a Python Django project, and then we'll do the models. We're gonna build the forms. We're gonna build the views. We're gonna do the templating with the Bootstrap. We're gonna do some access control so that people can log in. Obviously, you don't wanna create your stuff available on the cloud and anybody can just log in and access your client information in your invoicing. We're gonna do some very interesting PDF generation. You know, how to take data in from a database that's structured in a class and put it inside of a PDF template so that you can have, you can output an actual physical PDF document that you can email to the client, or you can print and save as your copy. So we're going to show you how to do that. And then obviously another important part of invoicing is being able to email that invoice to your client. So we're going to integrate being able to create invoices directly out of your Django application, being able to create a PDF document out of your Django application, being able to create an email, attach a PDF document to an email, send it directly to your client out of your Django application. So this is going to be really interesting, and there's a lot of bits and pieces that you're going to learn that you could take those components and use in another project. For example, the ability to create PDF out of Django that you can use anyway. Any time you're building software, you're going to need that ability, and you can use that knowledge applied in any other application that you're going to do. The ability to send emails is something that you can use even outside of this application. The ability to send emails with an attached document is a very powerful function. If you can do all of that, I think you can get any job as a Python Django developer, right? So let's get started. I want to start off by showing you the template that we're going to use, all right? I will make this available after every tutorial where we stop. I will make that available on a GitHub for you guys to be able to download, right? So what I want to show you first of all is a Bootstrap. We're going to be working with a Bootstrap template, and Bootstrap is an open source available free, well, not free really, but it's open source JavaScript and HTML libraries, CSS libraries that allow you to not have to build CSS and HTML from scratch. You can just use some of the pre-built components that they've got available, and you can put them together and do your own website, right? So if you go to the Bootstrap template, they've released this year Bootstrap 5, all right? So we're going to be working with Bootstrap version 5. At the top, every time when you download a Bootstrap template, just check which version of Bootstrap you're going to be working with. So we're going to work with the latest one, which is 5 version. So if you get to the website here and you open this URL, I'll also link this in the description below. The documents 5.1 examples. This is where we want to get started. These are examples of the websites that you can build with this Bootstrap 5, right? And I think from Bootstrap 3, this example page has always been there. And when you Google this online, you could end up Googling Bootstrap 3 examples. So just make sure that when you're Googling Bootstrap examples, that at the top over there, it says 5.1 so that you're working with the latest version of Bootstrap. So the way this works, right, is that you need to start first of all by clicking this download examples, and it's completely free to download. You don't even have to provide your information, your email, anything. You can just click this button. All right, I'm going to click it, and I've already downloaded it, but I just want to show you how it works. Immediately, you will be able to download this zip file, right? So once you download that zip file, if you go to your downloads, like in my case, I've already downloaded it before, and I'm downloading it again so you can see it. And you click on that zip file over there. It will open a folder like that. And inside of that folder, you will see Bootstrap 5.1 examples, right? And over here is the folders for everything that they show over here. All the snippets, the headers, the heroes, the drop downs, they're all available in a folder, in a standalone folder. So if you, for example, all you wanted was the nav bars, you could take this folder, and over here you will see the index of that example and the CSS for that example. All of these examples use the basic Bootstrap, JavaScript, and CSS, and that is kept inside of, I think there's a folder here assets. Yes, there's a folder here called assets, and inside over here there's dist folder, and over there they've kept the JavaScript and the CSS for all the different folders that are here. So if you wanted, for example, to only use one, one like the Jumbotron only, you must copy this Jumbotron folder and the assets folder, because the assets have the underlying CSS that all these other folders use. But inside of the specific folder, you will see the specific CSS for that HTML file. All right. So this will be the home page. It'll have a nice hero at the top there that says create an invoice. All right, you'll be able to click on creating an invoice, and then it will take you to a page where you can sign in. All right, you can sign in your username and your password, and then once you've done that, it will take you to your dashboard. Okay, I haven't linked that yet because I haven't linked my system. But once you sign in, it will take you to the dashboard where you will see a list of your invoices. You'll have the ability to add invoices, products, services, clients, and they will all appear in a table like this. And create new invoices, add new clients, add new products and services. You'll be able to print the information out, or have a look at your invoice, which will look something like this. So this will be what our invoice page will look like, the detailed one when you're viewing it off the website. But you'll have the ability to print it out as an invoice or email it to your client as an invoice. So this is basically what we're going to build in this tutorial, right? It's a really exciting stuff. You're going to learn a lot of skills, and so let's cover the structure first of all. Let's start with the structure of what we're covering. All right. So the client journey. A lot of web development projects, you always have to be very clear about defining what your client journey is. What does a client see as they're going through your application? So the client will be able to log into our application. Then they'll be able to create a client profile, right? In this specific case, I'm going to simplify this a whole lot. And instead of allowing people to register their profiles and so forth, we are going to build this like we're doing it for a small company, right? So we will create our own profiles in the back end, and people will just be able to log in. And if you don't have a profile, you won't be able to create one on the front end. You will have to log in with a profile that's already created for you from the admin panel, for example, just to simplify this. But if you understand Django and you've seen some of our previous tutorials that I will link in the description below, you want the ability for clients to create profiles in the front end, all right, you can incorporate that yourself, but we won't cover that in this tutorial. Then once a client is logged in, they're able to create products and services, and then they're able to create invoices, right? And you'll see that the products and services are linked to the invoices, and I will talk about that a little bit on when I'm talking about the way we're going to do the database design. And then after that, the client will be able to print an invoice, the client will be able to email an invoice, and then we'll be able to view invoices and do whatever you want to. So it's very simple application, but it's teaching you very powerful Django concepts that you're definitely going to be able to reuse a lot in your future. Right? And the design journey, the journey we're going to follow when we're doing this design, we're going to first of all start by creating the models, because the models form the basis of any applications. And if you haven't worked with Django before, models are like your object-oriented programming classes, all right? So Django is an object-oriented programming language. I mean, part of Python, which is an object-oriented programming language, right? So you do a lot of defining your classes as objects, right? And you do your programming around the objects and the classes that you define. So everything works around classes. So we're going to create objects for our data. And the objects that we're going to create is your invoice object and all the other objects that we need to define our databases. And once we've defined those objects, we're going to create models for them. So we're going to define, for example, an invoice object contains an invoice title, an invoice description, an invoice date, payable date. All those are all different elements, and there are different variables that define what is an invoice, an instance of an invoice, right? And then you can have multiple instances of invoices, which means you can have invoice 1, invoice 2, invoice 3, up to invoice 10, and each and every single instance will consist of all the variables that go into the class. And those variables, for example, are going to be like your title, your invoice description. All those things are variables that go into a specific instance of an invoice. So we need to define all of that inside of our class. Once we've done our classes, then we're going to go and create forms. All right, so forms are going to be very related to the classes. So if a class, for example, requires a title, a description, and a date, you need a form to collect all of that information. You need the form to collect the title of the invoice. You need the form to collect the description of the invoice. Perhaps you won't collect the date from the form, because you could use Python to dynamically determine the date from today's date, right? But maybe you need the form to describe what is the payable date, because maybe different clients will have different payable dates, right? So that maybe will include in the form. So not every single element of the model goes into the form. You have to decide from a design point of view, what do you need to get from the client? What can you determine programmatically? What is just like for example, the UUID, the unique ID, things like that. Those are just sort of utility variables that are just used in the back end to manage your data in the database. But you don't need the client to tell you what the unique ID of that invoice is. You could determine that from yourself, from the Python code. And then once you've done that, you're going to create the views. The views are what is used inside of the server to define a lot of the logic. Things like access control. So we're going to be able to access control, different views inside of the application. For example, the dashboard view, which is what we have over here, is a view that you should be able to only access if you're a member of this organization and you are logged in, right? So you don't want somebody who is just a normal person browsing the internet to be able to go to this URL and see your invoices. So you have to manage access control and be able to say only people that are logged in, for example, must access this. And you might even have inside of your organization even different levels of access. You might even say that only people that have created the invoice can see it, because maybe you have 10 people in the organization and 5 different clients, and then you don't want everybody to see all the invoices. You only want this person to see the invoices that's for their clients, for example. So you might control internal access rules as well. Or maybe you don't want, if I've created an invoice, to have the ability to delete someone else's invoice that they've created. And you don't want someone else's, person to be able to edit somebody else's invoice. So all of those things are going to be managed inside of the views. So the views, they control who sees what. They control sort of the organizational logic and your governance and all those things. You're going to write them inside of the rules. But they also control which template displays what. So the views they connect the organizational logic to the database, to the HTML, so that you can see so who sees what. All right, what template must be displayed when, your URLs that link to all of that logic, that server logic, is going to be written inside of the view functions. Then we're going to build the templates, and the templates are your HTML front end. So the HTML file, which are these files that we downloaded off Bootstrap, these are HTML files, but HTML files don't have any logic written into them. They don't have any Python code written into them. Maybe some templating code, but very, very low level coding inside of HTML. That's actually just the HTML itself and the CSS. So the HTML's function is just to display the information, and the information is going to be sent from the database to be displayed into the HTML. So if you think of our invoice, for example, over here, this is an HTML, right? That is displaying this information. But this invoice number, this company address, these items, for example, could be things that come out of your database, right? So the database is going to store your information data. That's going to go through the view function, which controls the logic and how everything works together and which template to display. And then that view function is the one that's going to render this HTML template with the information that you want, and you will see all of that as we are building this and how all of that ties together. So we're going to build the templates, and these templates and the views work very, very closely together, and you'll see how that works. And then after that, we will render the views, and we will build the client journeys as we have defined them over here. These client journeys, we are going to then build it over there. And then finally, we're going to deploy our website so that anybody can access and use it. And again, a bonus of this tutorial series is that I'm going to make this code available to everybody at the end. All right, so this is a project that I'm going to open source, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel so that you are aware every time we post a new video. All right, because I will make the code available as I go along. So today I will only make the code available for what we've done today, so that you can practice with the code. I will make the code available from when we're starting, so I'll have a starter code. All right, so that you can start with what we're starting with and follow along as we're doing and learn as we're doing. And then at the end, I will have a cheat, complete code in case you couldn't follow along and you just want to see what everything looks like at the end. So I'll have two versions available, the starter version and the complete cheat version, if you want to see the solutions at the end of the tutorial. And I will do that for every single week's tutorial, so you can follow along week by week from the starter to the end code. And so today, I spent a lot doing the introduction. So if you're watching and you want to take a bit of a break, you can pause this video here and take a bit of a breather and go through everything I've done. Maybe go through it again, go download your Bootstrap templates if you want to do it that way. Take a time, take a break, and we're going to continue from this point onwards with now the first part of our tutorial, which is creating the models. So we're going to try and see if we can cover more than one things in one tutorial series, in one video, and as long as the videos are not too long. So today we're going to start with creating our models, which means we need a Django project. Okay, we've done a lot of creating Django projects from scratch, and I'm going to try and do that very, very quickly in this video as well. Create a Django project from scratch and then start working on our models. Okay, so this is what our model is going to look like. Before you do anything in Django, you need to do the planning properly. And when you're learning online and you're learning on YouTube and you're learning on a lot of the learning platforms, they don't always teach you the right way of doing things, because you can only put so much in a video. All right, but I'm going to try and show you the right way of doing things. Planning is very, very important, right? You need to know what model you want to build and the relationship between the models, because you're always going to have some relations. So you need your foundational model and then the models that are related to your foundational model, so that you can understand how the relationships work and the kind of links that you must build in the database. Our base model in this specific application is going to be the invoice. The invoice is the main thing that we want to manage. So that's the base model. And outside of the base model, there is some relational models that are going to be related to this base model. The first one is the client. The client is, for example, Sasol is a client. So let's say you want to create an invoice for Sasol. So we're going to have a specific model that's going to be the client model, where we're going to build multiple clients, and we can have client 1, client 2, client 3 is Eskom, client 4 is Sasol, all the clients we have. And every time we build a model, we're going to relate that model to a specific client. We're going to say this client is the one that we are doing the invoice for, right? And then the other model that we're going to do is a product and services model. This is not always necessary, okay, but I just want to show you in case you have two relations. A products and services model is like, as a company, for example, I can build my products and services in advance. Let's say I know one of my product is, I sell tomatoes. So I can have a tomato. A tomato is a fruit, and the price of a tomato is 200 Rand, right? And then another thing that I sell is a banana. A banana is a fruit, and the price is 5 Rand. So I can build all the different products that I'm selling. And if you were an e-commerce business, for example, you could easily build your products in there. And every time you create a model, you can just pick a product and add, every time you create an invoice, for example, you can just say, add a tomato, add a banana, add this and that, and 2 tomatoes, 3 bananas, 5 whatever. And then your invoices will work much, much better, instead of every time typing, and then you'll be able to, like, later on when you do analytics, be able to see, oh, I sold 5 tomatoes, I sold 3 bananas, I sold this and that. Whereas if you had entered it manually in the invoice every time, 1 tomato, 2 tomatoes, and every time you type it differently, so if you enter it manually, you can't control how you enter it. So, especially if you have a different, people that are inputting invoices, everybody can enter it differently, even though it's the same product. So I could enter tomatoes, tomato, and and differently. So later on, when you want to do analysis, you're not going to be able to see that this was actually the same item. right? And if you want to control prices as well, that everybody is not going to be entering their own prices, then you manage it inside of the models. And we know that every time when we're entering a tomato, it's going to be that price. That's why we're going to do it like this specifically. So these are the models we're going to build. And you can add some other models in here, for example, which we're not going to do, but I'm just going to show you later, how you would do this. So let's say you would have users, right? And this is probably something you would do in a real organization. You would have a user model, right? So that every time you create an invoice, you can associate it with a specific internal user. And this is how you'd be able then to do access control. Because if you didn't do it like this, you would not be able to access control later on which user can access what. Maybe we will do this. Maybe we'll have users, because users are created by default anyway inside of Django. And then maybe we will add a relation between the invoices and the users so that we know who owns the invoice, who created the invoice. Later on, we can use that to control who can view an invoice, who can edit an invoice. Only people that own the invoice can edit or delete or remove an invoice. So maybe we will add this. Yeah. Okay, so let's get started. I think, you see the value of doing this exercise, even if you just do it on a piece of paper, right? It's about the process. It's about the thought process of what models do I want and what are they related. Immediately I could see that actually I want to have a user model so I can define that relation. Now, once we've done that, let's get over and start doing our Django application. And for that, I'm going to go to our Scholar Online Medium channel. I don't know if you guys knew that we had a Medium channel. If you didn't, I'm going to link this in the description below, because a lot of the tutorials we do, especially from the Django tutorials onwards, as soon as I'm done with the video tutorial, I would write it up in a written format. And even I go back to my written tutorials sometimes and follow them when I'm doing something, because it's just easier to follow off something I've written because I've conceptualized it already, instead of thinking through it again and making sure I don't forget anything. So I always go back to our own Django Medium channel, and if you scroll down here, I've got a lot of tutorials in here. I'm looking for the tutorial where you create the Django application, because I'm going to actually follow that tutorial. Getting started with part of Django web development. Okay, I'm going to click this. I'm going to link this for you in the tutorial as well, and I'm going to show you how to get started with a Django, right? So what are we going to do? So we need to first of all start by updating our packages. All right, so let's do that so that we can make sure that we're working off the latest packages, and then it's going to go and update. All right, so it's taking a bit of time. Great. And then I'm going to try and install all of this. All right. So just copy all of that and paste it. Continue, yes. Right. Oh no, I've got to install this as well. So this continues on, so I forgot that. Okay, so I need to do that as well. But it's not a problem. I can just copy this part only. Right, and paste this. This should have also been there as well. I should have installed that as well. All right. So we've done that, and then we're going to, so we've basically installed our database, and then we're going to go into our database and create, so what this is doing, this code over there, it's installing Python 3 pip, Python 3 development stuff that you need, all right, and then it installs the PostgreSQL database, because this is the database that we're going to store our information in. So the models that we're going to build that define the classes, those instances of those classes are going to be stored in this database. So so now that database is installed, this command, what it does is that it logs you in as a user, as a super user into the database, so that you can create your, into a PostgreSQL, so that you can create your database. This is the database that we're going to use inside of our Django application. So copy that and paste that in there, and you'll see now the prompt changes. We are now inside of the PostgreSQL database. And these commands over here are commands you need to do inside of the database to create your specific databases that you're going to use. All right. So this command, for example, says create database. This creates a database, and obviously don't call your database Skolo. Give it a specific name that you're going to remember. So in my specific case, I'm going to call this invoice. Okay. Create database invoice, and write this down because you're going to need this inside of your Django application. And the last thing you want is to create a database and then forget what password and what you called the database. Okay, so I'm going to call this invoice, and I'm writing down on a piece of paper the name of my database. Right, and then it's created the database. It will give you feedback, so everything is good. Right, then you're gonna create a user. So what this is doing is create a user called Skolo user with a password called password. So you don't want to use a password called password, and you definitely don't want to create a user called Skolo user. But this code, you can copy it, and then you can change these variables as you need them. Okay, so Skolo user already exists. I'm going to actually, what did I do over there? I can't create a user called Skolo user. So let me paste that. It's like entering it. So this is a problem. Okay, so let's do that without the comma. All right. So the user that I want to create is invoice user. Invoice user with a password called invoice password. Invoice password. Okay, you can use any other password you want. All right, and make sure you write this password down. Okay, I called this invoice password. Awesome. And then you can put the colon there, and then it creates a role successfully. Okay, it was trying, yeah, it was entering without me wanting to enter it. So I'm not going to copy that part. All right, so you alter the role over there. So just paste that. And remember to alter the role for not Skolo user, but for invoice user. All right, so delete that. Invoice user, set client encoding to UTF-8. Okay, this is important. So enter there, you alter the role. All right, and then you want to alter this as well to read committed. All right, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to alter the role for invoice user. Invoice user to default transaction isolation to read committed. Put the colon at the end. Did it do that? Invoice user. It should say, it should feed back alter role to me. To read committed. So this read committed, I forgot a, yeah, okay. So I need to enter a, yeah, that. Yes. So you should get this feedback that says alter role. Then you know that it's been done. Then once you do that, alter role to UTC. You can change this time zone to fit your specific time zone. Okay, you don't have to use UTC, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so this should be invoice user, and the time zone, you need to use your time zone based on where you are in the world. All right, so Google time zones, so you get the right format for it. Right, and I think it's the Wikipedia page for time zones that's got a nice list of them. And then you find the time, like I'm in Johannesburg, South Africa. All right, so this is the time zone I want. So copy that and replace this UTC with your time zone. So you can copy whatever, well, you look through this list and copy the time zone that's relevant to you. This is Wikipedia list of TZ database time zones. All right, and then I'll put the colon at the end over there. And it says alter role. That's good. So we're good to go over there. And then grant all privileges database. right? Database, it's invoice. This is why you should remember what you call the database. To invoice user, right? Awesome. And then you close that. Grant. That's good. And then after that, you can log out. So this last piece of, queue just logs you out of the database. Good. So now your database is good. You have to create your database before you create your Django application, because you're going to connect your database to the Django application later on, and you need the database to already be created. You need the database name. You need the database user, which is invoice user. What did I call it? Invoice user, one word, and then the invoice password with a space in between. Okay, I need to remember that. All right, so you need, after that, then you need to search to create your virtual environment. If you're working off a completely new droplet or virtual private, whatever it is, and you haven't installed this, then you can run this 2 lines of code. In my specific case, I know I've already installed virtual environment and I already have it in this, so I'm not going to run this. But this is for installing Python 3 pip3, upgrading it and installing virtual environment the first time. So I've already done that, so I'm not going to install it. The only thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to create so here you create the folders, the directories that you're going to work from. So I'm already in the directory that I want to work from. I'm already in invoicing. I want to work off this directory. So if you were not sure where you want to work from, create a new directory, and these lines of code, you need to run them from where you want your project to be created in the project directory. And remember, when you create a Django project, it actually creates a new folder that you still have to log into. So whatever you want to call the folder, you'll be on top of that place right now. So now I want to create a directory called invoice env. So I'm going to paste virtual env, and I'm going to call this invoice env, like that. All right, so if you ls in there, you will see you now have a new environment, a new virtual environment called invoice env. So you can copy that, and I've created a new folder called repo. This folder is for my own, Git moving files around. You don't have to do it, because I'm not going to cover Git in this tutorial. There's a tutorial I have on this channel. Just go through the list of videos where I cover in great detail how to install Git so you can use it to move files from your computer to your virtual server. From your virtual server, you can do it reverse, fast forward, whichever way, in either direction, quickly using Git. So that's what this repo is here for. But in this specific case, I just need to now activate my virtual environment. So to do that, I'm going to say source, the name of the virtual environment, bin activate, like that. And once you've activated it, you will see it's in over. It looks like that over there. So I've activated my environment, and then once you've activated it, now you can install Django. You need to install Django inside of the environment, not inside of your machine. That's a mistake sometimes rookies make. They install Django once off in the whole computer. You don't want that, because Django versions are changing all the time, and sometimes there's no backward compatibility with some stuff and some libraries and all of that. So every time I have a new Django project, I reinstall Django for that project inside of the virtual environment. That's why you use virtual environments, to control the versions you're working with inside of that environment. So the next time I create another project and I want to use a different version of Django, it doesn't affect my old projects, because everything is enclosed in an environment. So I'm going to pip install Django in there, and it will download. Django is a bit of a big one, and this is, I had forgot this in the tutorial in the past. I actually just added it like this past week, because I was following my own tutorial and I realized I forgot to install this. So this is important. You need to install this as well for the connection with the database using PostgreSQL. If you're not using the Postgre database, you don't need this, but you will need it. You will see an error anyway, and it will prompt you to install it if you didn't do it. Okay, so now you can start your project. Now, the project, I want to call it invoicing because I want the folder names to be the same. This is my own little structure, but you can call your project anything you want, okay? So Django admin start project, this creates a whole new Django project. And I want to call it that. All right, so I'm going to paste that, and Django admin start project invoicing, and click enter. You won't see anything at first, but if you actually ls to list everything in here, you will see now you've got the env, you've got that invoicing folder that wasn't there before. Okay, this is now your Django project and the repo. Initially, we only had the repo and the env. Now, what you can do is that you can cd inside here, because all the magic is going to happen in there. So this is now, you'll see the manage.py file, and all of this was created for you. All right, and if you want to understand the structure, I've done it nicely in the tutorial for you. This is the new folder that has been created for you. Inside of this this now invoicing folder, you will find the settings.py file, the URLs, and the WSGI, and then you'll see the manage. Now, what you need to do is that you need to cd in here. All right, so we need to cd in this folder. It's now the project folder. All right, we're gonna cd in there. Right, and this is where you have the, if you ls-l, this is where you have the settings, the URLs, and the WSGI. These folders are in here, these files. We need to now edit the settings.py file is the first thing you have to do. Okay, so you can be able to connect to the database. So to edit that file, you just do nano settings.py like that, and then it will open that settings.py file. And you see what you have over there with the, yeah, so I'm going to leave that for now. So yeah, remember to change your time zone in the Django folder as well. So change your time zone to be exactly the same as what you have over here. Africa, where are we? Africa, Johannesburg, where was I? There it is. So just paste this time zone in there and use time zone. Make sure it's used. TZ is also true. All right, your static URL is already defined there as static. All right, so there's a couple of things you need to do in here, and I've listed them in the tutorial. All right, so once you go into the settings.py, you need to change this databases to the database. This is why I installed this cycle 2 at the top there, because it helps connect with the database. So you can basically just copy this part, and you go at the bottom here where it says databases. You see this is the default SQLite database that it works with. So if you didn't change any of this, it would still work with the default SQLite 3, but I don't want to work off the SQLite 3 database. It's not suitable for production, because I'm going to immediately load this app into use. People are going to be using it already. So you need a more versatile database for that. So you just paste that in there, and then just remember to change all of the variables in there. Okay, so I think the password, I called this invoice password, and I think I called the user invoice user. And I think I called that invoice. So this is whatever you called your database. This is the user that you created, that you granted all privileges to. This is the password that you used, invoice password. All right. And be very careful. This information, you must keep it private. I'm only showing you this because it's for educational purposes. And later on, when you do this yourself, you really have to keep this information private, because if anybody could access your IP address, they could access your database if they knew your password, and they could, do whatever they want to do with your information. All right. Then the next thing that you want to do is at the bottom of the file, make sure you've defined your static URL. Okay. So let's go to the bottom over there. You'll see static URL is this, but the static root is not defined. So let's paste that, and right underneath the static URL, let's paste that static root. And then the other thing that you also want to do is you want to also, there's a couple of things you want to do in this file. Yeah, you need to import OS at the top, only because you are referring to it over there, and that's something I need to also add over here so that people doing the tutorial, but immediately you will get an error and you'll know you need to import it, right? And then this Django key, you need to change this to your own. This is also very important. You need to change it to your own secret string, and it can be as long as you like, but not too short, because this affects the integrity of your database and application information and everything that gets transmitted between the front end and the back end. So you want this this to be a very hard to guess string, so don't use what comes with the Django default. You're going to change this later on. Debug is true. Later on, when you are finished and you load your application, you need to change this debug to false, but for now, debug is true is fine. And then allowed hosts, you need to update in here as well. All right, so allowed host in here, we're going to put localhost. All right, we're going to put in here, what is it, 127.0.0.0. Is it three zeros? I'm not sure, but you need to put the IP for the local host. And if you're gonna load this later on, whatever let's say I'm gonna load this on a website called mywebsite.co.za, you're gonna add that in there. All right, but a shortcut way to cheat this whole thing, which I do not recommend that you do, all right, but I'll show you how, is to just put a wildcard in there. So a wildcard means every host is going to be allowed, but this is dangerous. Do not ever do this. Later on, go figure out what is your IP address for your machine. So my IP address is this one over there, and put that number in there and put localhost and all the relevant ones. All right, and then that's pretty much it. I think if there's anything that we're missing, do not be afraid of getting errors when you're running applications. Errors help you troubleshoot, so you can figure out where you've made the mistake and you can fix it. Okay, so from here you can then make migrations, but before you do that, create that that static folder. It's not there. Okay, so we're gonna create that directory called static. All right, and now we should be good to make migrations. All right, so you do path and manage.py, make migrations. No changes detected. And migrate will also check that your database is configured properly. Well, it's not going to check that but it won't run if your database is not configured properly. So if these two commands run without a hitch, you're good. And then after that, you're going to create a super user, because you need to be able to log into your admin panel. All right, this is important. So I'm going to create a super user here. I'm going to leave the super user name as Zatosh, or I'm going to change it. Yeah. And also remember what your super user you've created. So I'm going to change the super user name and use an email address instead. All right. And I'm going to call this admin@scholar.online. All right. And I'm going to write down what I've decided to call my super user. Right, let's just copy that, admin@scholar.online, and then the email address, same as the user, and then the password. This password is too common, because I'm trying not to forget my password. It doesn't matter, because this is created for security purpose. I don't mind. I'm just gonna say yes, it's fine. I'm gonna delete this application as soon as I'm done with it anyway. Right, this instance of the application. So once you're done with that, you're good. You can now run collect static, which is gonna collect all the admin static files into your static folder. Good, run without an error. And then if you had a firewall, you can enable it. And then after that, you're gonna run server. So this one runs your application. So we're gonna run this on port 5000. And if it runs without an error, you're good. All right, so let's go have a look at our IP. What is this IP? 178.62, port 5000. Put 5,000. Awesome. All right. So our application has been installed successfully. All right. So there's a couple of things that you saw me adding on that was not in the tutorial. I'm going to remember to update this tutorial as I go, because a new user might not know those things that I just remembered and added them as I went. But I will update this tutorial and it will be available, and you can follow it along, or you can watch this video and figure out how to do this. Now your Django application is good and ready to go. Now there's nothing in it because this is just working off the old default. What I'm going to do is I want to at least load this page. Not the dashboard. Let's go back. I think it was the index. I want to load this page so that at least when you go to our database, our application, you can see this page, right? So let's do that quickly. We're gonna need to do the index file, and before we even do that, we're gonna need to move our CSS and our static folders. Yeah, so currently so I'm gonna close this. Right. So the static folder and the CSS files are sitting on my personal computer, and I need to move them to my virtual server or wherever it is. So if you're doing this and you're running it from your own personal computer, you can just copy and paste the files. So if you look at our inside of static over here, if you go into static, all right, currently there's admin because we just moved the admin static in here. What you need to do in here is that you need to create the folder that's going to keep the static folders for your application. All right. And if you were, doing this on your own personal computer at home, you would just then move the static folders and they physically move them. But in my case, I'm going to need to move them in here, and this is sitting on an IP somewhere in the cloud. So I'm going to have to move them to the cloud. So I'm going to create a directory here that I'm going to call it assets. Assets, like that. All right, and then I'm going to move my static folders inside of this assets file. Right, and I'm going to use rsync to do that. So let us go and look at the rsync command. Rsync command, if you're working off Windows, not Windows, if you're working off Windows, it's not going to work. If you're working off MacBook, it's sort of built in, it's going to work. You can basically run this command, which will move files from this directory. So inside of my personal computer, development, invoicing, assets, I've got my assets file in there, and I'm going to move them to this IP address. All right. And this is invoicing static assets. I just created that folder now, but I retapped this ahead of time because I knew what I was going to call all these folders. And you can just double check that this is correct. This is definitely correct, but let's just double check that this is correct. So I'm going to copy it first. And you need to run this command inside of your computer. So you need to run it in your home computer, not inside of the VPS. You need to run it in here, but it will move the files to the VPS. So I'm going to paste this command in here. And I'm just going to double check. Inside of the home, Zatosh is the user. And then this is the path it's going to follow. Development, invoicing. Let's see. Development, invoicing, static. Right? Development, invoicing, static, assets. So inside of static, there's this file called assets, and then it's going to save in there. So it's going to save everything that's in here. It's going to save it in there. Okay, this is a very powerful command. Enter this. I've got SSH enabled in my computer, so I'm going to have to enter my SSH keys. Okay, if you didn't have SSH enabled, if you didn't have a password on your SSH, it will just move them automatically because I've already done SSH. So if you want to know how to do SSH, there's another video on this channel where I take you through setting up your virtual server, specifically setting up SSH keys, because that's the safest way to deal with virtual server, especially moving information back and forth. Watch that video and figure out how to do this. Otherwise, move your files manually, copy and paste them. All right. Then once you've done that, I'm going to clear in here and I'm going to list in there. My folder was called assets. So let's CD in there and have a look. You'll see I've got all the folders in here. All right. So it's assets dash whatever. Okay. So I'm going to CD out of here. I'm going to CD out of there. Actually, I need to CD back in here. Sorry. I need to be in the home root of my folder, of my project, where the manage.py file is. All right. So what are we going to do? We're going to create a new application. All right. Django, create a new application. Let's look at our tutorial. Oh no, our tutorial does not show us how to do that. But we really want to create a new application. So if you're lost and you're not sure how to create a new application, you go to Google and you Google create Django application app command, and you Google this, right? Django documentation is known for being one of the best documentation out there, right? They show you pretty much everything, how to do everything. You can follow this step by step and you'll be good, right? So I've started a project, right? I've run the server, all right? And I want to start an app. So this is the command I need to do, right? So I'm going to do path and manage.py start app, and I'm going to call this invoice. Right? You don't see anything, but if you list there, you will see there's now a new folder called invoice. If you cd into invoice, you will see there's new files that I created in here, your models, your apps, your all sorts of things. This is what we call an application. So we're going to build basically everything inside of here. Okay. So if we clear this, we're going to build everything inside of this. Okay. So let's cd out of this. Let's open our settings.py, because every time you create a new application, you have to register it inside of your settings.py file. So I'm going to say nano invoicing. Settings.py, and we call this invoice, right? So we're gonna go over there, installed apps, under installed apps, all right, and then we're gonna enter an app called invoice. Yeah, good. Now that you've done that, you're going to go into, we're going to cd into invoice. All right. And we're going to build our models in here. All right. So we're going to do nano models. Right. There's nothing in here. And this is where we're going to build our model file. All right. 3 model files that we're going to build in here. We're going to do this in the next part of the tutorial. So if you remember, let's find that our model design. We're going to be building 3 models. Our user model is created by default by Django. If you recall, I already created a super user. So that means that, I mean that user model already exists. Now, these models we're going to create from scratch. We're going to create a client model, product services model, and an invoice model. We're going to start with the client model, and I'm going to take you through the process of creating a client model, and then I'm going to give you some homework to learn from that and see if you can create the other 2 models over as your homework for today. Now, I have built this is really over the top model structure. Okay, a lot of online tutorials will not do it like the way I'm doing it, but I'm showing you the correct way to do things so that you learn things the right way the first time. Even if this video takes a little bit longer, you can take what I'm teaching you and basically go and do something really solid with it. So at the top of the model file is all the imports that we're creating. All right, so we're going to import the model library from Django. So all of these are Django imports. And over there, you'll see we're importing UID. So we haven't installed UID. So we need to quickly go over to our VPS and install it before we forget. So to do that, we're just going to do pip install UID. We're going to use it to create unique IDs for our slugs inside of our models so that we can be able to refer to the models separately. For example, if you had a client that somebody called, client A, and then another user created client A, and then you find the names are exactly the same, we're going to differentiate the different instances with a unique ID. So I do this with all my models, and it's just good design practice. You don't have to do it, but it's good design practice to have a unique identifier over and above what the database creates automatically for you, or you can merge them. It's up to you. Then we're going to import the settings. I don't think we're using the settings for anything here actually, so we're going to delete that. And then we're going to import the user class. We're always going to refer to the user later on. So I just import it at the beginning so I don't forget to import it later on. Then we're going to create our first model called client. And for that, you just say class client, and inside of the, you sort of give it the argument models.model, and these models is that models that you imported at the top of it there. And inside of the models, there is a class called model. So this extends that class to have all these other values, so you can sort of edit and add other things to that class to make it so it extends that what they call it, the abstract class, that you can do more with it. Now what I need, this file is structured in a couple of ways. At the top over here, these are all the variables that are going into the model. These are all the variables that define a specific instance of that model. So for example, we need to know what's the client name. That's just the most basic. We need to know what's the client name. And every instance will have a different client name. So you're going to be able to create multiple clients, multiple instances of the client using the model. The model defines the data structure. So if you had an Excel table, the model would be the rows of the table. So imagine you have an Excel table with columns at the top, column 1, column 2. So column 1 is name, column 2 is address, column 3 is whatever. Those are variables. And then the different rows are the instances. So this is going to be the variables, like at the columns of the table at the top. These are going to be the columns. And every time you create a different client, then we will create a different row in the database. You understand? So you need to know what columns must go into your database. The columns are this. So we're going to start with the client name, is the most obvious one. And we're going to call this a basic field. And then I've got what I call utility fields, and I use this for all my models, right? Utility fields are just fields I use for my own design purposes in the back end, to be able to identify different instances and to do other things in the background. You'll thank yourself later to have that you have this type of utility fields, right? The first one is a slug. Slug is very important because it helps with the routing, especially if you want a root slug version, so that you can be able to, it's good for SEO. So I always use the slug here there. And I always want to know the date created. I always want to know when was this thing created. Of course, the Django will probably keep track of it, but I want it inside of my model so that I can access it easily. So every time I create the class or the instance, I keep track of when it was created. And every time I make a change, I keep track of the day, the last update, so that I know when someone edited the thing, at least the date that the person edited the thing. You could also add more things and be more fancy here, and even be able to enter the user that did the changes and do that in the model if you want, but I'm not going to do that in the model. In the model, I just want to be able to manage when it was created, when it was created and when it was last saved in terms of the last update. And you'll see that then I modified the save function, right? So I super edited the save function to be able to create the date created automatically, and to be able to do the last update automatically. So let me put some space there so I can show you what I'm doing there. So editing the save function, the first thing I ask is if the date created is none. So this is the first time we create the model. The date created would be 9. Please create the date, use right now as the date created, which is the time zone, local time zone.now. You can also do datetime.now. It's up to you. But I want my time zones to be what we call time zone, to be what's the word for it? They call it non-naive, because a daytime is a daytime that doesn't incorporate, the time zone. So if somebody created the time and said, datetime.now, in South Africa, datetime.now is 13:45. And if you're creating an international application, someone is in the US and they look at that database and they look at datetime.now, they see 13:45. That's not their time because they're in a different time zone. So it's very important sometimes to incorporate time zones into your applications. And I do it by default because I never know how far my applications are going to go, right? If you're doing this locally, you might not have to. But if you've learned how to do it, by default by time zone, then it doesn't matter. You do it that way anyway, and then you're always going to do it the right way, which means this time zone, when it enters this time zone into the database, it's going to enter it with it's going to enter it with the specific time zone of that time that you've entered. And then it does this in the background. Django does this in the background, and instead of the database, it converts that date time that you've entered into a UTC as a basic time zone, right? And then the time zone it stores in the database is a UTC time zone, which means the next time someone requests that time, it will check their time zone and display to them at their specific time zone. So if I entered 13:45 South African time, if you're sitting in the US and you look at this application and you're in a different time, you're going to see your specific time, not 13:45. So this is going to make the daytime that you enter time zone away. So that's why we're doing it like that. But if you do this, make sure instead of your settings.py file, you also enable that, right? So in the settings.py file, I'm going to just open it quickly. Make sure you set this to true. So time zone, you must enter your time zone of the application, and you must enter this. All of these, you must make them true. Use that, use that, use that. All of these must be true for this to work properly. All right. So once you've done that, we're gonna go back to our model. Then we're gonna create the unique ID. The unique ID, we're gonna create it on the fly, right? We're gonna create it on the fly. We uploaded the UUID4 at the top over there, and we're gonna use the UUID, split the fourth one, and we're gonna just save that as a unique ID. So that's gonna just be saved automatically. So you're not gonna have to specify it. And then after that, we're going to create the slug as well. We're going to save the slug automatically. And you'll see, so this is going to be done initially when you first create the model. So this will run when you create the model for the first time, because for the first time, the date creator will be none and the unique ID will be none. So this will be done once in the beginning. However, every time you save, right? Every time you save, you will also be creating your slug and your last updated, because your last updated must change every time you save. So every time you save this thing, it will run this. So this is sort of extending the save function to run this every time you save, and this will run at the beginning only when these functions are none, when these variables are none. So this is a very neat way to keep track of your date updated, date created, your slug and unique ID all at once. And these are utility fields I use later on to find the detailed page using the slug, to always track when somebody changed something, to know when something was created, right? Then now back to the basic fields. The client name. What else do you want to enter for the client? I think I want the address. I'm gonna call this address line 1, and then this is a character field, and I'm going to leave this as a character field. So every time you enter a character field, there are a couple of things you must specify that are a requirement. The maximum length, you must always specify this when you enter a character field. And the blank and the null, you don't have to specify it. But if you don't specify them, then it will assume that they are false, that they cannot be blank. And if you're like doing migrations later on and you didn't specify it as blank, the previous versions of it, you'll have to like specify what must it put in those fields, because they shouldn't be blank. What I normally do is I just specify them all as blank, unless if I know something really mustn't be blank. I would give it a default in here, so that I don't get an issue later on when I do migrations, when I create a new variable, when I sort of enter new, because Django allows you to, on the fly update your models. So whatever model I come up with now is not fixed as the model for this application. Now I must stick with it no matter what. If later on, as I'm building the app, I realize actually I want to put in the client phone number and I hadn't done it before, I could just modify the model file and Django will re-update that and will manage that through the database migrations. So Django really allows you that flexibility. Now for the address line 1, I'm going to give it a little bit more characters in case it's a long address, but I don't know, 200 characters is a lot. You need to not overly specify this in case people are going to always push your application to the limits. There's people out there, I've built apps and there's people out there that just go there to try and crash your app. I mean, they'll just do these commands which they know they shouldn't. They're not trying to use your app, they're trying to find your weaknesses out. So you need to just sometimes do this to protect yourself as well as a developer. Because trust me, the more popular you're going to get, and if you build really good apps, people are going to go there and try and just make you fail. They will enter 2,000 characters in a thing to see what's going to happen. They'll try and like confuse your SQL database and do all sorts of things. So be careful and manage this, with security right from the beginning. So I have address line 1. And the next thing I want to enter is, let's say, your province, right? Should I enter it like that? Yeah, let's say I want to enter the province. And the province, I want it to be like a select field. So the province field would be like a character field, and then it would have choices. And then you can do the maximum length as well, that it's blank, and then you're going to give it its choices. So I'm going to say the choices are provinces. All right, and then I'm going to define those provinces, right? You need to define it as an array of choices that it's going to pick from. And then inside of that array, you define it as tuples. So my provinces, for example, I want to be able for people to select provinces. And the reason why, when you do database design, this is another important thing. It's easy to just say full address. Let them just enter full address and it will be easy for me to manage. But later on with clients, a client will let you build the application, and then later on they'll say, you know what, I want to see all of my invoices that are in the Western province. And then you go back into your database and everything is sitting inside of a, one long address character field. And then you have to do some, coding gymnastics to be able to just filter out, the addresses which contain a province of Western province, and then people would have entered it differently as well. So you're going to miss some. So maybe one accounting, junior enters it like Western province. Another accounting person enters it manually like, the Western Cape. And then another person enters it like Cape Town, even though they mean Western province. And then when you're trying to like later on filter your information and be able to find what's what, you want to find maybe all the invoices that are in, or all the clients that are in Western province, you don't find them all because everyone entered it differently. So when you do database design, always think about what are those variables that you can enter as choices, as select choices fields, so that you can, as much as possible, try and put things into classes, and not classes, but you can put things into classifications, so that later on when you're looking for, maybe analytics and things like that, you can just, query the database for this, part of the select, people that selected this, people that selected that, and it's easier later on to manage your data that way. So only things which really are completely random do you put character fields. As much as possible, try and use select fields. Even for a question like, what's your age? Let's say you're asking people, what's your age? Someone is going to enter, I'm 1. Another person is going to enter, I'm 5 years old. Another one will enter, 5, like the word will type 5, And then later on, if you want to figure out how many people are 5 years old in your database, it's hard to search, right? But if you then instead created a select field that was, I'm between 5 and 10 years old, I'm between 10 and 15 years old, I'm between 15 and 20 years old, I'm between 20 and 30 years old. When people enter their age, they just have to pick in there. And then it's easier to then later on aggregate and say, okay, I can find all the guys that are 5 years old, or the people that are between 5 and 10 years old. You know what I'm saying? So database design is also about thinking into the future of how you're going to be accessing your information from your database later on, okay? So in this specific case, we're going to say provinces. We're going to enter Gauteng, right, as a province. Right. Then I'm going to copy this. I'm not going to enter them all in the interest of time. Maybe I'll just put 3 options, and you can enter them later on in your own time. Okay, so I'll enter Gauteng, Free State. and I will enter Limpopo. Yeah. Limpopo. Right. And then these are the choices that you use. Okay. So what else do you want to know for your client? So you want to know their address line one, you want to know their province. Maybe you want to know their their postal code. Okay. And I'm going to use a character field there, even though a postal code is technically a number. I don't like to use numbers unless if I really have to. I'm going to store them as strings. All right. I don't need to do any computation with this. And then I'll be able to use a for mask in the front end to make sure that they enter only 4 digits, which is not easy to do with numbers, for example. So postal code, I'm going to make this a character field, and I'm going to make maximum character length here. A postal code is not going to be more than 10 characters, not even more than 5 characters in South Africa. So I'm going to make it maximum length 5. But so I don't get too many errors, I'll leave it as 10, right? Then what else do you want to enter for your client? You want to know their phone number. All right. Let's have a look over here inside of our invoice. I think we had an invoice. So this would be all your client information. All right. You want to see their client name, their address, maybe their phone number. And then maybe you want to see their email address. Okay. So we want to see their phone number. We want to see their email address. And maybe you want the client to enter manually an account name or an account unique ID, but that's why we have the unique ID there. So maybe it's not important. So I'll put all of these. I'm going to make them character fields, both the phone number and the email address. And I'll tell you why. I like to do it like that so that I can manage the input from the form side, right? Instead of maybe making this an email field and making that a phone number field, which Django has, by the way. Those things sometimes can cause errors, if you don't program them properly. For me, I'll just put everything as a character in the database. And then I would manage how they get inputted from the front end using form control variables like form masking and all sorts of other things to make sure that a phone number is entered in a certain format and that an email address is entered in a certain format. But so I'll leave it like that. So I think I'm happy with that. Client name, if later on you decide you wanted to add a new, thing, you can always do that, right? So this is good, right? Let's have a look again. I have client, I have all of that, all right? So once you're done with that, you need to register this in your admin.py file, all right? And for that, I'm going to Google this again. I'm going to Google register .py file, right? Admin site. This is not the proper documentation, but it's gonna work. This is what I'm looking for, right? So inside of the admin.py file, let's go in there. Let's go and nano inside of our app called Invoice, and we're gonna look for the admin.py file. That's not it. Don't save that. Admin.py. There you go. So inside of here, I'm gonna register that. So the reason why I do this is so that I can be able to see the model inside of my admin panel, right? So we're gonna paste that and we're gonna put in the proper name of the model, which is client. Right, so we're gonna paste client over there, and we must make sure that we import it at the top. So from .models, import everything. From .models, import everything, and then say register the client model. All right. Then we need to then open nano all of this models.py. Right, you'll see I don't have the models in the actual VPS. I was just writing this inside of my code editor. So I'm going to remove everything that's in here, so I do not double import. Then I will copy that and paste that in there. Okay. All right, I can already see I've got an error in there. I've got something that's going to give me an error, so I'm not going to save it. Let me change it quickly over here. You need to return something for the string, all right, for this model. So now that we've written it, so let's say we want to return the client name, right? Actually, no. Let's say we want to return the client name, and we want to return the unique ID, right? So this will be .format self.client_name self.unique ID. So what this will do is that when you're displaying the name of this model, a name of an instance of this model, it will show you to help you identify that specific instance. The string version, it will show you the name of the client, and it will show you the unique ID like that. So you can define how you want it to be displayed. So I want it like that, and I will use this as well to create my slug, so that the slug will be the client name and the unique ID. If you want, you can have, let's say, the client name and the province, so you could have the client name and they come from that province, and then you could have self.province, so that you can know which province that client is from. It's up to you. So then it will show you, it will display the name, the province, and where the client is from for that. And I'm going to use the same thing for the slug. Okay, so when I define the slug, I want to define it like the client name and the province that they are from, and then the unique ID of that client as it's created from the beginning, right? So I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to copy that. All right, and then I will do that again, and then I will paste it in here. Right, so let's delete these. Right. Okay, and that's it. All right, so that's our first model created. All right, so we're going to test that this model was created and it works well. I'm going to every time you change your model files, you need to run migrations again. All right, so we're going to do that by doing python manage.py. We're going to do make migrations. Provided there's no errors, this should run without a hitch. And if there's errors, it will tell you what the error is. So hopefully there's no errors in my case. Then when you finish doing that, you need to run migrate like that. Everything is good. So we're going to test our model is working well. We're not going to do it in the front end. We're going to do it in the back end in the admin panel, because we've registered it on the admin panel. We should be able to do that. So let's run our app. Manage.py run server. We're going to run it on 5,000. Good. So I think that's where we were running it before. That's on 5,000. All right. So let's do that. There's still nothing there because we haven't defined anything in the URLs file, whatever. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the admin panel. Okay. And then I should be able to log in here as admin. Remember when you created the super user when we started? All right, so let's log in as that super user so we can see the back end of our website. So it's going to be admin@scholar.online, and then the password that we created. Don't save it. All right, so you'll see the users. The users is created automatically. This is all the users that we have inside of our application. I'm the first user, and I created my profile over there in the back end. And then the clients, there's no clients, but you can see this is the client model we just built. All right, there's no client there, but you can add a client at the top there. And then you can see these are all the fields you have for the client. So you can add a client name, and then you'll have a first instance of the model client. This is what we mean when we say we build models. You build a model to define the data structure, and then you use the model to create instances of that structure. So you use that model to create different rows of the column that go into the database. So all of these are columns in the database, and every time you create a new client, they are rows in the database. So we're gonna let's create our first client name over here. So who's our first client? YouTube Centon branch, right? And then they live in 21 Rivonia Road. right? And now you can select the province. So you don't let people enter the province manually how they want to enter the province. They must pick from a menu of available provinces. This is in Gauteng, and the postal code is 2196. And their phone number is 011 456 2345. Their email address is info at youtube.com. And the unique ID, we don't have to enter that. We don't have to enter the slug. We don't enter any of this. We only enter this known information, and then we save. And then it will run in the background, and it will recreate those for you as you save, because you've now upgraded that save function. If you then, this is now what I was talking about when I said, this is the string that displays, what the instance of the model that you just created is the client name and the province they are from and the unique ID. You see, this is the client name, the province they are from, and the unique ID. And if you click on that, you will then see the client name is that. All right, and the slug was created for you automatically because that save function ran, and it created the slug using the unique ID at the top over there. All right, and then the date created was also created for us automatically, 14.09. Okay, this is South African time based on our time zone. If you looked at this in a different time zone, you would see a different time because we made this time zone aware. And the last updated was this time. So let's say last updated it was 1409, the same time we created it. Let's now change this YouTube sentence branch to YouTube 4-ways branch. Right? So we're gonna change the client name, right? And then we save and add another. Okay, let's not add another. Let's actually just go back to the client list. You'll see now this has changed. It's now YouTube 4-ways Gauteng because we changed the name. But if we click on it, you will see that name has changed. You'll see even the slug also changed. YouTube 4-ways Gauteng is no longer what it was before because I'm updating the slug every time I save. Every time I save, I want you to get the name, the province, and whatever, so that the slug does not get stuck with the last slug that you. And I see this with blogs sometimes where someone creates a slug once, and if you edit the blog and you edit the title, the slug of the blog remains the original slug that was created the first time, and not updating every time with the title name. So this is important to include this in here, that every time you change the title, the slug also changes. It's not good for SEO to keep changing the slug, because the slug is going to be used to route this later on when we're routing the detailed page. But hopefully you're not going to be changing your slug titles, your blog titles all the time, because if the blog title changes, technically the SEO should change as well. And then you'll see now the last updated is 14/10/22. It's different from the date created. So this last updated will change every time you update the blog. And this is not built in automatically. I mean, it is built. I'm not sure. I think it's built in automatically, but I like to have it in my model so that I can see it physically and I can refer to it in the front end physically. I mean, see the last updated. Do some modifications with it. So basically, this is how you create the model file. So we've now created the model file for clients. Now for your homework, I want you to use the same system and create the model file for services and the model file for invoices. All right. I want you to take a stab at it. All right. And then next week, what we will do is I will show you the answers to the questions. I will create these model files for you nicely. And then we'll continue with our design journey. We'll go into creating the forms and the views. So we'll start to incorporate the HTML. I don't think we're going to have time to do even the front page today because we're running out of time and this tutorial is getting long. So we'll keep that for next week. Make sure you subscribe so that you keep track with what we're doing. I'm going to be showing you everything step by step. By the time we're done here, you will have a fully functional, you'll have this website fully wired with Django and being able to log in from there, being able to create invoices like this, being able to email these invoices to clients, being able to print them out in PDF. This is some truly amazing stuff that I'm going to be teaching you. So stay tuned and we'll catch up next week. And yes, I will link in the description below. I will link this Django code, right? So I will link what's in here. I will put this on our GitHub page, and then I will link this for you so that you can at least see what I've done up to today. So you won't see the HTML for now, but you'll see at least what I've done up to today. And thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next week.